July was a great reading month for me. I managed to read 6 books and I learned something about different cultures, which was really interesting. I went into space and explored new planets, which was also really great. And I learned a bit more about writing and some beautiful birds. So I hope that sounds as interesting to you as it was for me, and let's get started. So very welcome to my July reading wrap-up, which has a great combination of some more historical and philosophical books, some really fun sci-fi, and also a little bit of learning as well. I did read 6 books, 1 comic and 1 magazine, so this month went really well. And I was reading quite a lot because of my holiday as well, I think. In any case, let's go back to the beginning of July and start with the first book that I read. It's rare that I feel like I've learned so much from a single novel, but this book made me think and reconsider my notions so much. The Lion Women of Tehran by Marjan Kamali describes the lives of 2 Iranian women, Elahe, or short Ellie, and Homa, how they grew up in a comparatively progressive country in the 1950s and 60s, but it also focuses on their friendship. Not just how you can become fast friends, but also how you can lose that closeness and still get it back later on. It talks about how your surroundings can influence and change you, and how there are some parts of your character that will remain. It was an incredibly deep read, and I loved how real and flawed our main characters were, how they struggled with expectations and their own wants in life, how they kept on fighting and being Shirzan, the titular lion women with their own strength. There is a great quote to explain this idea, as one of the girls tells the other, Shirzan, lionesses, us. Can't you just see it, Ellie? Someday, you and me, will do great things. We'll live life for ourselves, and we will help others. We are cubs now maybe, but we will grow to be lionesses. Strong women who make things happen. I also learned a lot about the country and society of Iran from before I was alive, which was really interesting and showed how much progress can be lost in a short time. Part of the society that Ellie grows up in is marked by old superstitions, and her mother keeps telling her that even those who love you the most can ruin your life, even the ones you trust the most. Which makes her worry and be a more jealous person, while Homa grows up differently and wants to fight for her own rights and the rights of the women of Iran. Watching the 2 of them clash but still be the best of friends was just a great experience. All in all, I'm really happy that I got around to reading this book, and I can highly recommend it if you want to learn more about a region that the most of us probably know too little of. I will say that it is quite a mature read, and there are quite a lot of darker themes in there as well. But it's a nice mixture of dark and light, of happiness and sadness, and it was just an amazing read. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, and let's go ahead and look through my goal pages. Of course, it is another book read for my overall goal, and it goes onto my unowned bookshelf because I grabbed it from the library and I had to wait for it quite a while. This one also fits into my book bingo in terms of diversity because it is by an author from a different culture, as I'm obviously very far removed from any Iranian culture so far. This then means that I can also use this book to add another country to my country collection, which I finally have gotten back up to date. So let's put the Iranian flag in here as well, and there we go. Unfortunately, that's it for this book because all my other challenges are already filled up enough. So let's move on. Next up, I started diving into my science fiction mood and read The Martian by Andy Weir. Since I really enjoyed Project Hail Mary, I had high hopes, as the concept sounded intriguing. A guy gets stuck on Mars by himself and has to somehow survive until another mission will come by and might pick him up again. It had the same vibe of solitary scientist figuring things out as Project Hail Mary, and I somewhat couldn't help but compare the 2 books. The structure of the story is quite similar in both, which I generally don't mind, but I will say that I like The Martian quite a bit less. Let me explain that. And please don't get me wrong, it's still a fun survival story with great scientific quips and quite a few plot twists. But the thing is just, I saw most of the plot twists coming. And our main character, Mark, has a more vulgar humor than our main character from Project Hail Mary, which I enjoyed a lot more. So I just didn't vibe as much with this guy. And add to that the fact that it is even less realistic in terms of international collaboration than Project Hail Mary was, which was already quite a stretch, to be honest. And with that, you get me reconsidering my initial 4-star rating while I was writing up my thoughts, and at the end I chose 3.5 stars instead. That still means that I really enjoyed the book and that it's a good story, but it just wasn't as great as I had hoped for. Anyway, the one thing that I did like in this comparison of books was getting multiple points of view in The Martian, from the base operations on Earth and the other astronauts on their spaceship, and for me that changed the type of storytelling a bit, which I really enjoyed, but in the end it couldn't quite win me over too much though. All in all, I found it to be a fun little read. It was engaging, it kept me wanting to continue, but it just wasn't as good as the Hail Mary, by quite a bit in my opinion, which I'm sad about because I really enjoyed that book. But I don't know. Have you read both books? If so, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree, or am I just way off in this? In any case, I think most people will have heard about the story of this book or seen the movie maybe, so I'm not gonna go into much more detail, but let's instead head over to my goal pages and let's tick this book off as another read one as well. Of course, it also goes onto my bookshelves as one of my unread books, so I'm gonna put it right next to the last one. And with that said, we're already done with my goal spreads for this book because unfortunately I don't have any spaces that I can tick off with this one. As I said, it was just a fun read for in between, and basically my idea instead of reading a romance story if I just want something quick and fun. But yeah, that's it for this book, so let's move on. I also wanted to start with an audiobook quite early on, so I picked out this month's audiobook based on a recommendation by Leandra from leandra.tbr0, who I tend to watch quite regularly, and that was a really good choice. Welcome to the Hyunam-dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-reum was a great cozy story with a lot of philosophical elements. It is a contemporary fiction translated from Korean and basically follows our main character, Young-chu, as she builds up a little neighborhood bookshop after giving up her stressful company job. I really liked getting the different perspectives of all the other visitors and friends who found their place of comfort in this little cute shop. And it was also great to follow the characters finding out what they value in life and what they actually want. Of course, it also helps that it plays in a bookshop, as that means that we get to talk about books and writing and about setting up events and trying to make a small independent shop special enough and visible enough so that it will survive. And of course, it is about reading and getting into or getting back into the habit, which is always quite nice to hear about. For me personally, it hit especially close to home as I'm currently struggling with my day job and finding joy in life. So listening to this beautiful audiobook made me think about some of the questions for myself as well. And it definitely gave me the feeling of not being alone with my struggles. So now I'm really interested in finding out more about this author as well, and I have already seen another of her books in my library. So maybe that will be something to look forward to. If you're also looking for a cozy story about finding your place in life and learning to be content, maybe give this one a try. With that said, let's go ahead and also have a look through my goal pages for this book. Of course, it counts as another read book, and as I got it from the library, it goes onto my unowned bookshelf, of course. It will get this different shade of green because it's an audiobook, So that makes this part of the shelf look quite nice as well. In terms of the bingos, since it is a translated book from Korean, as I said, I really want to use it for my field up here and put it in for that prompt, because it obviously fits very well. But it doesn't have any themes that I'm still looking for, so nothing on the second board. With that said, we can head over to the country collection, where I can put down another flag on my collection that I finally updated for my half-year progress, basically. And I'm going to try and keep this more up to date with the coming books as well. So let's see if I can manage to do that. In any case, South Korea goes on here and we can continue. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit onto any of the alphabet challenges, so this is it for this book. And the next book that I want to get into is one that I picked up at Eurocon, because at this point in time I was already back from my trip there and all the new books were looking at me quite expectantly. So after seeing and talking to Becky Chambers, I decided to first pick up To Be Taught If Fortunate, a lovely, positive sci-fi novella about a group of astronauts that are out exploring faraway planets. In this setting, humans have learned to use genetic engineering to enhance our bodies to deal with higher pressures, radiation, and otherwise lethal issues. This has helped greatly in allowing humans to explore further away in space, and a community-based space agency has sent out a range of missions to study planets that could possibly have life forms on them to explore. This means that the small crew is made up mostly of scientists and one engineer who work together to collect as much information as possible on the different worlds they visit, while also making sure not to do any harm during their stay. This was a really beautiful and enjoyable read that just made me feel hopeful for the future, even though not everything worked out as it should. It is a really interesting thought experiment as well, that directly asks the reader to follow along on the astronaut's journey and in the end make a decision on their fate. I enjoyed that concept and also the added bonus material in the back of the book that included some conversations that Becky had with her mother, who is a scientist and who helped her create mostly realistic science fiction. All in all, I really like remembering the different places this book drew up in my head, and I'll say it was a great read for sure. So if you've read anything by Becky Chambers and you like her style, I would definitely recommend this book as well. In terms of my goals, of course, it also goes down as another read book, and it also is the first physical owned book that I read this month, because as I said, I just bought it. So I'll take it off down there as well, before we can head over to my bookshelf, where it fits on the new shelf and gets colored in this huge stack of newly bought books from Eurocon. It doesn't fit into any of my open bingo spaces, but of course it goes onto my monthly goal page, and I'll just color it in orange because that is the main color of its cover, and I quite like how colorful that makes the page look. And with that, we're done for this book, because even though it has quite a long title, I still can't fit it on the alphabet challenge anymore. So let's head on and go look at some smaller reads. Because next up is the magazine that I read for this month. I was actually thinking about picking up one of my newly bought magazines as well, but then the current edition of my conservation magazine arrived, and I really wanted to for once be up to date on it, so maybe even get some relevant event invitations or anything else that is time sensitive in time. So I quickly read Feuer an Bord, which dealt mainly with our oceans and the problems that they have because of global warming. I read about a few species that I didn't know and a lot of conservation efforts that try to somewhat keep sea-based species alive. It was especially interesting to read that they have managed to grow some corals that are more heat resistant and are now being used to regrow the huge coral reefs that have died in the last few years. Overall, we still really need to stop polluting our poor Earth this much, but at least there is some hope for keeping species alive until we can figure that out as humankind. So it was a fascinating read and a great setup for then going on holiday in the north of Germany and seeing some more water there as well. As the first magazine that I read for this month, it of course also goes down on my goal page as my read magazine, and I will obviously put it on top of my magazine stack on my bookshelf page as well, and that one is looking just great at the moment, and I'm quite positive that I will actually manage this whole year with reading a magazine each month. Of course, it also goes onto my monthly goal page, and this time I'm not going to color it in green because it's not about any creature that lives on land, but rather about oceans, so I'll color it in blue and give this page a bit more lovely bright colors through that as well. So with that one done, let's move on to the next read. As I said, I was going on holiday, so I quite quickly started on another audiobook, as I like the option to listen to something while traveling on holiday, especially for an early and long train ride. So when my library hold for Bird by Lamott came in, I was really happy about the timing and excited to get into it. This book was on my radar since I heard Celine over at the Uncharted studio talk about it, and I'll link her video for you below. And it sounded really interesting, like she got some great writing advice from this book. So since I'm just starting to write again, why not grab some more advice along the way? And I will say that there is some great advice in the book, especially about creating very simple short assignments for yourself to write just a little bit when you get stuck, or also about treating your first draft as something that is supposed to be shitty. I think that way of thinking definitely helps when the writing gets rough, and I also enjoyed the point about finding a writing group or partner to have some discussions about your stories. And hopefully I have already made a step in that direction with some of the lovely people that I met at Eurocon. In any case, there were definitely pieces of advice in there that I found helpful. However, unfortunately, I really didn't vibe with the writing style and the humor of the author, which I sometimes found to be quite weird. There were chapters where I felt like she was describing the inner feelings of a teenager rather than a grown adult, and maybe it was meant for a younger audience, I'm not sure, but those parts just ended up annoying me. Enough so, actually, that I had to tell my dear partner about my irritations quite a few times during our holiday trip. So for me, overall, this book might be worth a quick read through, but I'm quite happy that I didn't buy it, as I certainly don't want to reread it. But I'll take the advice that fits for me, and that's still a win in my book. With that said, it of course also counts as another read book for my yearly challenge, and as another library book, it goes onto my unowned shelf as well, right next to the first audiobook that I listened to this month. Apart from that, I actually can't fit it anywhere, so that's already everything that I'm going to do for this book for now, so let us move on. And next up, there was a second very short read that I went through this month, which is quite unusual for me. When I was tidying up my room a bit, I came across some old comics that I used to read as a child. Tim und Struppi, a French comic series about the reporter Tim, in original Tintin, and his little dog that always go on crazy adventures. These classic comics were always really funny, and back then my library had a lot of them, so I would spend many afternoons sitting in the little reading room going through the whole series. In any case, I only own very few of them, but when I saw those, I really wanted to go down memory lane and read through one. So I picked up Tim in America, as it is one of the earlier adventures, and just sat down with it for an hour. Now I find it even funnier how lucky Tim always is, so it was quite a nice time. And while I won't count it as a full read, I do want to use rereading it for one field in my bingo. So let's go over there and look at that. As I said, I'm not going to count it as a book, but I will put it down on my reread shelf. And while I do that, I will struggle with fitting it because of the plant sticker that I put there. But since the comic is quite thin, I feel like it fits there better than it would fit somewhere else, so I'm gonna squeeze it in anyway. And in terms of the bingo field that I want to use it for, I have one for a graphic novel or a digital novel or some kind of comic kind of thing. And I really want to use it for that one because I don't think that my library has anything that interests me in that area, and I'm not really sure if I want to buy something because it's not really a type of storytelling that I know that I enjoy. And so I decided that that's fine and I'll do it this way. The final book that I read this month is Denial of Service by Aiki Mira, which I read in the German original. I actually picked up this book on a whim when I was at Eurocon because I knew that the author was there as one of the speakers and they were also signing books. So I figured that that was a great chance to get into reading something by them as well. I didn't have the clearest idea of what to expect from the book, and it was really interesting to delve into it because it is written in a quite different style to most of the books that I've read in the past few months. It has very short little chapters and it switches perspectives quite a lot, and we follow a lot of different people. The thing that brings them all together is that they live in Frankfurt, a German city, that has become autonomous and is controlled by an AI that basically was put in place by some super rich people that live there as well. This means that all the people that live in Frankfurt have a city chip implanted with which they can interface with the city and basically find out how to get places or order things or even just use the elevators or something. So it is a very futuristic setting. I mean, it is a sci-fi thriller, so that makes sense. And our story basically starts with a few city kids that live on the streets and experiment with drugs. Some of them take a digital drug and then one of them runs away and the others only find her again when she has died in a small restaurant around the corner. In that restaurant, we basically have all our characters that we were following meet. We follow a programmer who has just started working for the City Intelligence Center that is basically looking after the AI that leads the city and working with that. We also have, of course, the street kids that I was talking about, and we have the owner of the restaurant that has just found out that she didn't get it quite legally. She got it from her mother, and her mother used some quite illegal measures to get it. And so these people are present when this girl dies, basically, and they get worried quite quickly because the city is not reacting to this death. So since nobody knows why she died, they're all quite interested in trying to figure it out, and thus it turns into somewhat of a murder mystery, and they try to figure out what's going on and why the city is not reacting together. I won't say more because I don't want to spoil the book, but I will say that you're probably only gonna really enjoy it if you like very abstract and weird storytelling. For me, it was almost a bit too weird, to be honest, but it was really interesting to read and it had some really interesting points to think about in a philosophical way as well, which I think is quite often in good sci-fi books. And it was actually quite a good thriller because it did get you hooked on trying to figure out what was happening next. Even though some concepts were a bit vague and a bit difficult to grasp, I still found it a quite creative kind of storytelling for sci-fi and AI topics. And I did enjoy the read overall. So with that said, let's put this last book down in my goal spreads as well. Of course, it counts as another read book, and as you can see, I have it in the physical format, so I can also color it in on my bookshelf in the new books section, because as I said, I just picked it up this month at Eurocon. And once we have finished that, we can go ahead to the bingo pages, because as a thriller, and with a lot of the novel being about those people trying to solve the mystery of what the city is doing, I feel like this is a great fit for my thriller or mystery square on here. So let's put it in there as well, and then we'll check the alphabet pages. But once again, I can't fit it anywhere. I think I really soon need to have a look at what's still missing and if I even have any books around that would fit the open spaces. In any case, that's it for this one. And then there is one more book that I do want to mention really quickly, at least, because I read quite a lot of it, but I'm still in the middle. That one is Proud Jenny J, and that is a collection of short stories around different corvids, so ravens and crows and birds like that. And because it's a collection of stories, I kind of like to read 1 or 2 stories a day, but not much more, and because of that, it's taking me quite a while to get through this book, but it's really fun so far, and I'm excited to tell you about it in my August wrap-up because I'm almost done at this point. But yeah, that's everything that I read in July, and I felt like it was another great reading month. I'm really happy that I get around to reading as much these days, and I really enjoy reading as my huge hobby at the moment. So I'm happy that this is going this well. And I'm going to try and maybe listen to a few more audiobooks, maybe do more than one every month from now on, because I feel like it's a great way to spend my time when I'm doing sports or going outside for a walk. And it also allows me to get through a few more stories as long as the library has some available for me. So yeah, thank you very much for being here and watching my wrap-up. If you're interested in seeing what I will be reading for August, I already put out a little video about my TBR, so I will link that for you as well here in the end. And with that said, I can only say thank you so much for watching this video, for sticking around with me, and for coming back to my channel again and again. I really like the community that we're building and the discussions that we're having in the comments. So if you want to tell me anything, or if you're interested in anything and want more of something or less of something else, please do let me know. I'm very happy to read your comments. And with that said, I wish you a great rest of your day. Go pick up a nice book, read something great, and I'll see you next time. Bye!